Hello everyone, I'm Gemma Beall. Welcome to Beyond Second Cognition. Today this presentation is going to be called, Are You a Survivor? And I just kind of wanted to share a little story here. A couple of weeks ago, maybe a month ago or so, we were without electricity for most of the weekend, and Endel and I were sitting around kind of kicking ideas back and forth about scripts to do. And I thought of one that I was going to call I'm a Dumbass Driver Survivor. And the whole premise behind this was kind of poking fun, not at people who go through things that what they go through when they consider themselves a survivor, but just the whole concept of survivorship or survivorhood. Now, earlier this year, I did a video presentation called, I can't remember which one it is, but I will find the link and post it on here for you to listen. But I talked about people, claiming their victimhood, and that claiming to be a survivor is still a form of victimhood. Now, I know that this is a very sensitive subject for many people, and please know I am not making fun of anyone. But I am pointing out the ludicrousy of the victimhood along with survivorhood. Now, the reason I didn't do the video back then, and I've got a list here that I'm kind of going to share with you about my ideas and some questions that I genuinely want people to ask when they are standing there in their survivorhood. But the reason I chose not to do it at that time, because I have a friend who has recently gone through cancer, and I didn't quite know how she would take this, and I did want to be sensitive to her feelings, so I just kind of set it on the shelf and forgot about it. Well, a couple of days later, she called me just to let me know how she was doing, and without saying a word about what we had talked about, she had told me, "You have my permission to share my story." And I asked her a question. I said, "Do you consider yourself a survivor?" And she said, "Say it."
No, not really.
Well, that's not exactly what you said. How did you say it?
I don't remember, honey.
Fuck no. That's what she said. She said fuck no. Anyway, I want to introduce y'all to my friend Pandora. She is going to be telling her story where it concerns to being a survivor. Now, some of the questions I had down here in pertaining to survivor and the reason behind the survivorhood that people claim, in my opinion, it's strictly to elicit sympathy. When you think about why somebody claims to be a survivor, it's like I said, I'm a dumbass driver survivor. Every day I leave my house, I encounter a dumbass driver that tries to kill me on the road. So if I were to want to elicit sympathy, I could sit there and wear that label, or claim that label, or tell other people that label. And so it makes no sense at what point that people choose to label themselves survivor. So with that question in your mind, and please, like I said, if you consider yourself a survivor, please don't be offended by what I'm saying here, because I do want you to listen to Pandora's story. Pandora, take it away.
Yes, ma'am. Hi there. Well, I'm Pandora, and I'd like to thank Miss Gemma for inviting me on to this podcast. It's actually my first, so I feel very, very privileged to be here. So thank you, Miss Gemma.
You're welcome.
So, and as far as the survivorship, the whole conversation sort of started when I noticed, as someone who has recently been through cancer, I noticed that people were treating me differently. And they were looking at me with this sort of pitying look. And even though I realized that that was more about them, I found that energetically it was beginning to affect me. It became sort of like I was sort of a symbol to them of some kind, which nobody needs that shit in their life. Nobody needs that kind of responsibility. And frankly, to me, pity has always been an insult, frankly. And I came upon that idea long ago. Now, to be fair, I've been through a lot of things. Bad things have happened to me. And I did for a very long time consider myself a survivor of those things. But in doing this work with Gemma, with Endel, and others, I've sort of discovered that, the old saying, that which does not kill you makes you stronger, is a very true statement. However, people's sympathy and the energy that sort of elicits can kind of start to wear you down. I don't know. I'm just a human being who happened to go through something that was really traumatic, frankly, to me physically, to me emotionally, and otherwise. But I don't know, just I have a real problem with somebody who suddenly feels sorry for me because of what I had. And by the way, I say had because I no longer have cancer. Right now I'm in the after effects of going through treatment for it. However, anyway, and of course, that's where everything kind of started really hitting the fan, by the way, because as you know, with any kind of chemotherapy and things of that nature, you lose your hair. And basically, as a very wise doctor pointed out to me, suddenly that becomes sort of a beacon to the world saying, look at me, I have no hair, I'm going through chemotherapy, I am a cancer survivor. And that does become a bit annoying, as I said before. But at any rate, again, I had a problem with the whole pity sympathy thing. And which is why this whole thing sort of started up between Gemma and I, and we started this conversation. And frankly, I don't need anybody's pity. I'm not being arrogant. I'm not being, anything other than who I am, and I'm just trying to get through this, the best way I can, and with some dignity, and with respect for people around me. And I don't know. Oh dear. Protective puppy, sorry.
Yes, we have animals in the house, both houses, so you will hear dogs and you will hear cats, but not together. The dog doesn't like that energy of sympathy.
Hang on. Shh, stop it. Sorry, Oxen who thinks she's a Doberman or a Rottweiler. At any rate, I don't care for the whole concept of sympathy.
Let me ask you a question to make this easier.
Yes, ma'am, please,
if
please.
little terror there will allow us to continue, and I say that with love. You are an empath, correct?
Oh, yes, ma'am. Very much so.
Okay, and for those of you, if anybody stumbles across this video who is not familiar with our work, an empath is a person whose form is physiologically sensitive to other people's emotional energies. So as an empath, where somebody else may feel an emotion, if an empath is in close proximity and is not properly shielded, is going to pick up those emotions as it is their own. Now, as an empath, how does this sympathy energy affect you?
Ooh, that's an excellent question. In fact, I was formulating that thought as you were speaking. In point of fact, I don't want to use the word devastating, but it's a little bit, because that seems hyperbolic, but it brings me down. That's the only way I can say it. Now, I just want to say that also, it's not that I don't need help. It's not that I don't need love and care from people around me, that I don't need understanding, especially on those days where I'm having a really bad day due to the side effects of chemotherapy. So I'm not saying, oh, I'm going to, I'll get through this by myself, screw everybody else. I'm not saying that at all. I'm not saying I don't need help. But what I am saying is that I don't need pity. If you want to come help me. That's great. I will take that help. But the pity, the energetic signature of that particular emotion is incredibly difficult to contend with.
You said that, talking about pity, that you didn't need that energetically speaking, and let me kind of give a clarification for some people who don't necessarily understand. And this is something that, as an empath, when I couldn't get answers from anybody else around me or any of the literature out there in the public, I went within myself to try to understand my own emotional energies and how that energy affects myself and affects the world around me, and how other people's energies also affect me as an empath. Now, pity has its own energetic signature, as does sympathy. They are not the same thing. They're two completely distinct energies. And although they may seem harmless to another person, the energetic density of those emotions are quite dense and rather anchoring, in my opinion. Now, you mentioned that it kind of brings you down, and that hence supports my perspective on anchoring. But let me ask you this question. Does that sympathy or that pity energetically feel different when it's coming from a stranger than when it's coming from a loved one?
I think from a stranger, it's a little more acceptable. Don't ask me why. I get that because they don't know me, I don't know them. And I know that they're going to go on with their life and probably forget all about me.
Uh-huh.
When it comes from a loved one, it seems to be kind of like a tiny lead balloon. It's just that much heavier because they're there, and it's incorporated with their love for you, fear, concern, all those things that happen, and guilt, believe it or not, in some cases, although how another family member could be guilty of my cancer, I have no idea, but it happens. So it tends to be condensed, and in my experience, it's been a lot heavier to deal with when I have a loved one who feels the sympathy or the pity. And even though they are two distinct energies, I think they're very similar in that they do make you feel, I think anchoring is a very good term, because it is like you're carrying a lead weight of trying to, you're trying to hold yourself up and just live and just be. And then, again, me being an empath, I'm very sensitive to other people's energies, and I can feel them going, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. In fact, that was a very long conversation I had to have with family members and loved ones. And I had to tell them, look, this is not you. This is not about you. I'm dealing with this. I need you to love me. If you're going to be hysterical and crazy, then go do it on your own damn time, because I don't have time for it. I don't have the energy for it, So I would say this: I'm not your problem to fix. I need your love. I need your help. I need your support. But this is not your fault. This has nothing to do with you. It just happened, And once we came to that understanding, it seemed to alleviate a lot of fears and concern in that kind of stuff. Some folks are still dealing with the sympathy thing, and I kind of have to make an allowance for that because of their position in my life.
Well, and you just can't, you can't necessarily turn it off, which is something I want to explain here
right,
a little bit
right.
when you're done talking. Go ahead.
No, absolutely right. You can't, and you can't control how somebody else feels. You can explain to them how their actions or their words or whatever are affecting you, and then at that point, you speak your piece and you kind of leave it at that.
Yeah.
So go ahead. I'm sorry. What were you going to say?
No, you're fine. In being somebody who has worked really hard to not allow emotions and emotional energies to control my life, the one thing I've noticed about this form, and this is kind of voodoo information for people who are not familiar with our work, and I did a podcast the other day over on our Patreon channel, talking about the physical form, and everything within the physical form, especially where our emotions are concerned, are programmed into the form as an automatic response. That doesn't mean we cannot learn to control them or learn to kind of manage how those energies develop within the form when it comes to certain situations. But the emotion itself, the production of that emotional energy, is not necessarily something that we can control, or stop or prevent, but we can learn to control it as it's happening. So for someone like me who has worked very hard to learn to control these emotional outputs, especially where it comes to other people, I understand, when I heard about your instance, I felt that emotional energy of sympathy tried to well up, and it's like, no, I'm not going to do this to this person. There are people out there, and psychology actually has a name for it. It's called Munchausen by proxy. And what it is, these people, they need that sympathy and they need that pity from others as a food source, so that they will intentionally harm their loved ones or children in order to elicit that sympathy from other people. But most people in general do not have a dire need for those type of energies. And I've gone through some things in my life that were rather life-threatening myself, and the one thing that I did not want at that time was that energy from other people coming at me. But once again, they can't necessarily control that energy of guilt or fear or sympathy or anything else. So I understand how difficult that is, but most people in general, they don't think of the terms of the energetic emission and how it affects other people. Because I personally am an empath. I understand how other people's energies affect me. So I understand how my energies affect other people. And I try to completely shield them from my emotional output.
Right. And I have to say, though, that with cancer in particular, it has a very distinct the sympathy and pity thing that comes with you, or comes at you, has an additional kind of added spice, if you will, because of the fact that you have so many organizations, with the breast cancer, and Lance Armstrong with the Livestrong and all of that. It sort of brings it sort of adds to it. You know what I mean?
Well, it's like a cultural mandate that you feel it when you hear somebody has cancer. It's almost a cultural mandate that you exhibit some sort of sympathy, because if you don't, they view you as cold and uncaring.
Oh yeah, I mean, here's the thing. Before my diagnosis, I've always said, fuck cancer, frankly, because I've lost a parent. I've lost many dear friends, more than I care to even consider right now, to this disease. At some point I realized that now they're free, they're out of pain, they're not suffering anymore, they don't have to deal with any of shit. Hell, they don't have to worry about their bills anymore. You know what I mean? They've got it good right now.
That's almost worth it right there.
Exactly. Thank you. But again, because there's this sort of global, PR campaign when it comes to cancer. I mean, you've got these entire hospitals that are dedicated to nothing but cancer. And every time I go to my chemotherapy treatment, I go, you know what? I can't wait to the day when all you motherfuckers are out of work.
That would be great. That would be great.
And they just
not
look at
that I want them to not have a job, but that means that the cancer of society, i.e. cancer, has been eradicated.
Exactly, and they'll look at me like I'm crazy, and then they start laughing, because I'm like, hey, it's not that I don't want you to have a job, because there's always going to be sick people, but this particular thing, in a way, I think this, it sort of feeds itself, this sympathy energy with these hospitals and all of these, organizations and all of this other stuff, and it sort of feeds it into this sort of, if you'll pardon the expression, it turns it into kind of this energetic clusterfuck, and it kind of exacerbates things, and the thing is that with that, with all the TV ads and the radio ads and all the run and all this other shit, this stuff is actually instilling fear into people.
Yeah.
and making them afraid. It's like, oh my God. And that in turn, I feel that from them. It's like that's where the pity comes from. And they're also thinking, oh my God, I'm so glad it's not me.
Oh yeah, there's that. There's that.
You know what I mean? And it's like, and actually it was really funny though, because one gentleman that I was getting some medical cannabis from, because it helps, it really does help, and CBD oil, that's a whole nother podcast there. But anyway, it really does help with my symptoms, or the side effects of my chemo. But I said, God, man, I'm so pissed. And he said, why me, right? Why me? And I said, no. I said, no, why anybody? I'm not saying why me. It could have been me, it could have been anybody. That's not the point. I'm pissed off because I had a doctor who misdiagnosed me and almost killed me. My oncologist said, you're 2 months away. You were 2 months away from death. That's it. Bought the farm, pushing up daisies, the whole 9 yards.
No more bills.
So I was just pissed about that, not about the cancer. I've never been pissed off about the cancer. It just happened. And I'm not a victim of it. I'm not surviving it. But I can tell you what I told the chaplain. Very funny. Chaplain came in to see me after my surgery. She said, well, now that you're dealing with all of these issues, how do you feel about it? What are your thoughts? And it was kind of funny because I went ahead and talked to her, even though they asked me, what is your faith? And I said, I have none. And they kind of looked at me, and they kind of all kind of chuckled and laughed, and they thought somehow that because of this, I was going to change my mind about this whole concept of God.
Well, a lot of people do, to be quite honest.
Right. They always say there's no atheists in foxholes, and I'm like, well, I'm not an atheist either, so there's that. But anyway, the chaplain wanted to come in, and I said, yeah, cool, whatever. And she came in, and she said, how are you feeling about all of this? And she was trying to be so sweet and understanding and loving and everything. And I said, this is not how I go out. And she looked at me like I'd grown a second head. And I said, this is not how I go out.
Oh, I'm sorry. That was incredibly rude.
What?
I said, did it have hair?
Oh, snap. Just to let everybody know who's listening out there, I am bald as a billiard ball. As Endel said, Yul Brenner's got nothing on you.
You're talking Kojak here, but you know what? You're fucking rocking it.
Well, thank you. But at any rate, at the time, both of the heads would have had hair. Okay, smartass. So anyway, I said, this is not how I go out. This is just not how I go out. And I said, the way that I go out is underneath some sweet young man. And, my tombstone can say she came and she went. That's how I die. And of course she was, kind of mortified. And then after a few moments, she started laughing. But, man, you got to have a sense of humor about it. But again, all of these organizations, all of these things, they all sort of build up this sort of frenzy, this frothing, seriousness and oh, it's this horrible thing. The one thing that cancer could not take away from me, although I must admit I'm happy it took away about 50 pounds worth, not including the tumors that they removed, but it couldn't take my sense of humor away. And it won't. And I refuse to submit to that sort of that line of thinking. And again, if a stranger does it, it's no big deal, but it's kind of hard in our society right now with the way cancer is advertised. I mean, it's almost like it's rah 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 cancer. Even though it's supposed to be anti-cancer,
Yeah, it's almost like it's pushing
not.
for it.
Right. It's almost, because let's
we're
face
not
it,
gonna
cancer's
get
a
into
moneymaker.
For people listening, we're not going to get into the conspiracy aspect of it.
Oh, no.
I've got opinions on it. But that being said, yes, it's almost like, when you plan an idea and thoughts are so powerful, And fear, although it sucks, is also very powerful. And when you couple fear with thoughts, it can create many things and not necessarily all positive. And that's one of the reasons, you know, oh, we're trying to bring cancer to awareness. You know what? Everybody's fucking aware. Everybody is fucking aware of cancer. Everybody is fucking aware of what it does. Everybody's fucking aware of the treatments and fucking aware of everything negative about it. And that's one of the reasons I wanted, you know, I'm glad that you gave me permission to share your story. And that's one of the reasons that I want to do it, because this is the first cancer story that I've really heard from a positive note. As weird as
That's
that
kind of
sounds.
funny to me. You and my nurses after my surgery, they were shocked. In fact, they commented to me that they were very surprised at my attitude. Said most patients are very bitter and angry, and I mean, I was joking with them, talking to them, and I said, why? You know, I said, I don't know. They just there are. You're not like any of our other patients at all. So suffice it to say, they loved me, and I them, because they were so kind to me. They were so, but never condescending, never sympathetic, never pitied me or anything, because, you know, nurses are tough like that. You know, medical people are tough like that. And yeah, no, I was if I could make them smile, I'd make them smile, and made myself smile too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I never said, why me? I never said, oh, this is bullshit. And there was never that ever. And I feel like everything in my life, everything that I've been through, all the stuff that I have, that has happened to me, good, bad, or indifferent, was in preparation for this entire situation.
Episode.
Yeah, I mean, and that's all it is, really. I mean, it's just, Jesus, it's just a drop in what I hope is a nice long life, you know?
Yeah.
And so, and I will let everybody know that I did everyone a favor and did not procreate. So, you know, you just have to deal with me. But I mean, in so many ways, this situation, this episode has actually convinced me of my strength and my resolve to do better, to be better, and not in a, you know, Lifetime movie kind of way. It's more about who I am as an energetic being, what I put out into the world, and the power that goes along with that, and the responsibility, frankly. So to me, this has been, in spite of, you know, I'll be honest, the chemo sucks. The chemo really sucks. But in spite of that, I probably feel the most positive I've ever felt in my life.
If you had one thing that you could share with somebody else who's going through similar to what you're going through right now, what would that piece of advice be?
Really, again, don't bother with the why me. That anger just feeds into the wrong things. And really, by laughing, by enjoying your friends, enjoying the downtime that you have, even though, again, it's not always great, to basically say fuck you to that disease and everything that comes along with it. Because, you know, I don't know, don't give up. Just don't give up. And again, I don't mean to sound like a Lifetime movie kind of thing, or I'm not trying to be schmaltzy or anything. I'm just saying that, fuck you. I'm going to be who I am. I'm going to be myself. And you should be yourself. And if you can help someone, help them. Don't pity them, but help them. and do it genuinely because it's the right thing to do. And just hang on, hang in there, because this too shall pass. And again, don't mean to be schmaltzy, but that's all I got right now.
Well, I think that's enough.
No, for all the people who might hear this and who may be going through what I'm going through, I'm just telling you, man, hang in there. You got this. You got this. It doesn't have you. Okay? Again, I know it sounds schmaltzy and stuff, and I know it's not always easy, but you can do this. Because fuck cancer. Fuck it.
Fuck any of the shit that tries to destroy us.
That's right.
That means human, disease,
Or
anything alike.
Right, or some kind of freaky deaky energetic shit that can be out there sometimes, which there is. We all know that.
Yeah, we do.
But don't let anybody ever change your world. I'm sorry, that's John Lennon, I know, but just hang in there and just take it one step at a time. And some days you may be crawling, but that's okay. If you're crawling, you're moving. You know? And I understand. It's going to be all right. It's going to be all right.
All right. So another point that I want to point out here is strength. And I was thinking about this the other day, and I'm going to kind of dovetail this into it because a lot of people don't know or realize their own strength that they have within. And a lot of people will sit there and pump their fist, I am strong, I am strong, I am strong, in the effort to try to convince themselves of their internal strength. Now, for somebody like me, who's kind of discarded all of these ego and first cog perceptions, I see that kind of mantra as a total ego affirmation trying to convince oneself of something that they are. Not something that they have, but something that they are. Whether they psychologically feel strong or not, they've got that strength within their PSOYCA, within their being. And in light of what you went through, I don't even know how to put this into words, so excuse me if it sounds crass, but how hard did you have to look for that to get through it?
I'm sorry, look to what to get through it. I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
Look for that internal strength. You know, a lot of people, they come into a situation like this and, oh, I don't have the strength to carry on. But they push through. I mean, how hard did you have to look within yourself to find that internal strength that's always there? Does that make more sense?
You're gonna, yes, it does, and you're gonna hate me for this, but I didn't have to look.
That's my point. Why would I hate you for it?
It was there. It was just there. I never, you know, again, people, and there were some people who would come to me again with the sympathy pity thing, and I would laugh, I would make a joke, I would say things like, you know, this is not how I go out, and some of them, you know, thought I was being arrogant, you know, and kind of foolhardy or whatever, but I mean, really, that really just says more about them, yeah. You know what I mean? It's their own fear, their own weakness, whatever.
And part of the indoctrination that we go through as children,
right?
Is that
and that's weak. I mean, and to be fair, that's everybody. Just about any human being almost every human being on the planet has that issue. But I never had to do that. It's like okay, I have to admit there was one moment, okay, when I was in the emergency room, and I'm thinking I thought it was completely something else. I had no idea that it was, you know, these tumors. And they said it's a mass. And I just remember I laid down and I covered my face, and I felt this overwhelming darkness just enveloping me. And it was every nightmarish thing I had grown up believing in, because as you know, Gemma, my mother died in 1970 at the age of 32 of cancer. So it was like a big boogeyman in our family. And so I just for a moment, just a split second, and just as that like darkness was enveloping me, suddenly there was still a crack of light. And right then, my dearest, sweetest friend in the whole world, who was with me throughout this entire thing, by the way, 48 hours with me in the emergency room and being admitted into the hospital, wouldn't leave my side. And she made some offhanded, goofy remark at that moment. And suddenly I said no. And whoosh, the darkness went away. And it was brief. It was like maybe 5-10 seconds tops. And that was it. And there was never a question of, where am I going to find the strength or whatever. It was suddenly there. And with it, my sense of humor and everything else. And I very much leaned on my humor to get me through it, because that's how I deal with things. Born and bred smartass. I can't help it. And Gemma knows my family, so she can attest to this. But at any rate, there was never a question of the strength or where am I going to tap it from or get it from or whatever. I was wondering where I was going to get energy from when I needed it, but strength, no. It was never a question.
And see, so many people go looking for that internal strength, and it's like missing the forest for the trees. It's what you are.
Yeah.
And that's what people need to understand. You don't have to look for strength. You are strength.
No, and you have to also be prepared to be in the moment. Again, everything that's happened to me in my life was preparing me for that. That I hate to say it because a lot of people get kind of pissed off about it, but it is what it is, and there's certain things you have no control over and you can't change. So at that point, you have to say, okay, fine, I can't go this way, I'll go this way. You know what I mean? You have to be able to, and flexible enough to take another route, go another way. And you have to understand that, you can make plans, but that doesn't mean shit. It doesn't mean it's going to happen.
No, you have to be able to find a solution right there in the moment. And like you said, you may not necessarily control what comes at you, but you control how you respond to it, and you control how you solve it.
Absolutely. And sometimes there is no solving it. Sometimes it's just a matter of, just hanging on and getting through it.
Yeah.
Because, if I had my druthers, I wouldn't be here. Hell no. But the fact is I'm here, and while I'm here, I'm going to do the best I can with the time that I've, during this downtime. I see it as kind of a forced vacation right now. And where I just get to sit on my ass a lot and read and, do shit, whatever I want, watch TV.
You went to a destination with a tropical storm heavy at hand, huh?
What's that?
Said you went to a destination with a tropical storm heavy at hand.
Yep. And that's it, and that's
pass.
all you can do.
It will pass.
What?
I said, but it will pass. It will pass.
Oh, absolutely. That's the whole thing. And I know that there's a lot of people that are out there that are struggling right now who are not in the position that I'm in. But again, you don't have control over certain situations or certain realities, but the only thing you do have control is in how you deal with them and how you react to them. So if you can, try to do it with some dignity and some grace, because that seems to get you a lot further along, and just you'll feel better, because the more that you internally try to fight against whatever,
the resistance expends energy. So
absolutely,
when you lean into it, that prevents you from expending that energy that you need to get through it. But when you sit there and fight it, and people's like, oh, I'm fighting cancer. Well, it's not the same thing like you're in a boxing ring fighting an opponent and expending all this energy. You've got something attacking you, and if you fight it with the mentality that you have to save yourself from it, it's going to expend more energy. But if you, like you did, okay, this is what it is, you lean into it, you've got to go through the process without fighting the process, you're going to get through it with a lot more energy on the ass end of it, because you saved it instead of trying to resist it. And a lot of
Right.
people, mentally speaking, and this is a mentality thing. And it's like we've talked about, this path it's a psychological path. It's not a spiritual path. And you have to tool your psychological state of mind to certain aspects in order to have that mentality of seeing it as something to resist, or something to allow, that's happening anyway, whether you chose it or not. It's happening anyway, so you could either struggle and fight against it, or you could lean into it and save your energy and just go through it, because you have to go through it. But if you fight it kicking and screaming the whole way, it's just going to deplete you more, and you're not going to have the energy to ride the wave, so to speak.
Right. And I just have to interject something. I'm not speaking for all cases, and I'm telling you just my own experience, okay? I know that there are people right now that are terminal.
Mm-hmm.
I know that there's a lot of people that don't have a lot of time, but you can make the best of that time if you choose to. And I knew that at one point this was a possibility, and I said, am I going to, first of all, I didn't know if I was going to survive it or not. And I thought, well, I can either choose to live, the final days of my life in misery, or live it with some joy. And I chose joy. And not everybody's capable of doing that. And believe me, I get that. I totally get that. And I'm not saying that, you shouldn't be bitter or whatever. You do whatever you want.
And you're not saying it's easy either.
Right.
Everything in life is hard. To put it this way, all the good things in life are extremely difficult.
Right. I mean, and so are the hard things, to be fair. But I just think, again, the only thing that you can control is how you react to it. And there was recently a death of someone who is very famous, and the one thing that seems to me is that whether you agree with him or not, it seemed to me that he died well. He died the way he wanted to die. And, as far as I'm concerned, that's a pretty good way to go, So I'm not saying that, if you do what I do or whatever, that, you're going to end up like me. I would never, my ego is not such that I would say that, I know better than you do. And, some people may be listening to this going, fuck you, you don't know what you're talking about. You're not going through what I'm going through. And that's true. And I cannot speak for everyone. I'm simply speaking for myself. Okay, let's just be clear about that. This has been my experience, and if anything I've said can give somebody some comfort, or maybe help them to see things in a different way, different perspective, then fine. And again, and if not, that's okay too. It's your journey. Whatever you decide to do, then it's on you. I'm not trying to dictate to anybody. This is simply my story.
Yeah.
So,
well, that's what we do here. We're just sharing a different perspective for others to consider, and hopefully help others find inspiration in the process. Okay. I wanted to make this presentation about being a survivor, and we have gone over your story here because you have gone through one of the most common known attributes of being a survivor. When I say attributes, everybody, just about everybody that that has had cancer considers themselves a survivor. But I want to address the other aspects of survivorhood. How rarely do you hear, I'm a teenage survivor?
never.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, I personally didn't. I survived my teenage years, which was a fucking miracle, if you ask me. We also hear, I'm a survivor of bullying. I'm a Still Magnolia survivor. I have survived that movie at least 40 times. And like I said, a lot of people are going to sit there and take this that I'm being mean and I'm picking on people, but I'm not. I'm picking on an idea. I am making fun of a mindset that is very stultifying, in my personal opinion. And like I said at the beginning of this, before we all went all, Pandora kung fu on this cancer issue, this survivor mentality is specifically designed to elicit sympathy from other people. And, there are some people that need that sympathy in order to tap into that internal strength that they already have that they just can't see because they're expecting to see it in a different light. Okay? And one of the questions that I put down here when Endel and I were kicking this idea around is, does survivorhood have an expiration date?
Well, that is a loaded question, Gemma.
Well, and the reason I ask, let me.
This is going to cause this is going to probably piss people off. Okay.
Let me qualify this real quick before you go into it. And the reason I ask this, because at work the other day, I was talking to somebody and I just introduced myself and he introduced himself, and the first thing out of his mouth is, I'm a cancer survivor. And I'm like, oh really? How long? And he said 20 years. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, I mean, good for him. And but I don't know. That's like, it's really funny. Like I told you, I'm pretty bald right now, and I don't feel the need. I mean, people look at me and they kind of have an idea of what's going on. And most people will stop and I'll catch that look, and then I catch the energy coming off of them. But I don't feel the need to explain to them why I'm bald. Maybe I just decided I felt punk rock and just wanted to take all my hair off. You know what I mean? It's none of their business. But when somebody goes and basically, it's like he's bringing you into his shit. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And, let me just toss this out there, okay? And I'm not trying to start a debate or anything else on this, but there are a lot of bald men out there. A lot of bald men. And a lot of men choose that look.
Yeah.
And a lot of men carry it off really well. But how many people look at a bald man and generate that sympathetic energy? How many people look at a bald man and think, oh wow, he has cancer, or he's battling cancer, or he's going through that? Okay?
Oh, never.
And I also know a person personally who is female of the heterosexual gender, no picking on the gays or anything, who purposefully shaves her head because she just hates dealing with hair. And she cannot go anywhere without strangers throwing sympathy on her. She's had strangers walk up to the street and hand her money and tell her good luck. I mean, there's so many assumptions made, especially when you see a bald woman. I've personally met another woman who's has a genetic disorder that her hair falls out. I can't remember what it's called. It's not alopecia, but it's something along those lines, and her hair is very patchy. And I will be honest, the first thing out of my mouth is, I didn't ask her if she had cancer, but she kept alluding to her hair like she was wanting me to ask her about it. And so I accommodated her request and asked her if she had gone through chemotherapy. I didn't ask her if she had cancer. I asked her if she had gone through chemotherapy. And she looked so relieved that I asked her. And then she spent an hour telling me about her story. And I think it all kind of goes down to that sympathy thing. People need to have others interested in what they have going on.
Well, I mean, they also have a tendency to want to make things about themselves, rather than saying, first of all, it's none of anybody's business. Second of all,
why do you want to make it someone's business?
Well, you can make it someone's
No,
business.
but why does anybody want to make that someone else's business?
Well, I mean, it goes both ways. I mean, the woman that you're referring to is the one who's saying, basically, look at me, look at me, look at me, and please notice me. And then you have the people who are going, oh, see, I see you. I get it. You know what I mean? They're trying to, they try to insinuate themselves into the situation. Either way, both of those people are kind of, I don't know, they're being intrusive, and I don't know. I think that's. I'm
going to ask you a loaded question.
Okay.
Why did you give me permission to share your story?
Because I think it's one that needed to be told.
Why?
I don't know. I hadn't really thought about that.
I could tell you why. Because you have a truly unique perspective on this. I've never heard anyone who's gone through that claim to not be a survivor.
Oh, well, I mean, I'm not ashamed of what's happening to me. I'm not embarrassed by what's happening to me. I don't feel guilty about what's happening to me. It's just something that, again, if this helps somebody, if they get something out of it, then cool, then great.
Well, one of the reasons that I wanted to share it is because of especially, even though you gave me permission, I wasn't really going to go there. But what made me want to go there is when you said to me, when I was talking about the sympathy, and you said you can't stand that sympathy energy that people are throwing on you. That is why I wanted to do it, because I don't know how many people understand the energetic component of our interactions with each other. And that's really the point that I wanted to make, because people rarely understand the consequences of their action, and even less people understand the energetic consequences of their energetic emissions. And in this, whether you are into metaphysics or not is irrelevant, this stuff exists. Whether it can be quantified by science, this stuff exists. And there are many, many people out there that utilize and emit energy on a daily basis, and all of our interactions with each other are energetically based, whether you admit it or whether you recognize it or not. And especially when it comes to survivorhood, I mean, it doesn't matter if it's cancer, if it's spousal abuse, if it's bullying, if it's being gay and being unsure of yourself, or the transgender, or any of these survivor stories. You're producing energy and putting it out there. Or people who are attacking you are producing energy and putting it on you. Even people who are sympathizing with you are taking their emotional energies and dumping it on someone else, whether it's wanted or not. And I think that's the point that I really want to make with all of this, and I probably have not done a good job of doing that. But that's
I mean, here's what I'm thinking also, and I'm going to say something right now that is going to be extremely controversial, and I get it, and people are going to probably say, fuck you, whatever. But the fact is that right now in our society, in particular now, with the advent of the internet, et cetera, people seem to enjoy the emotions, the energy that they glean from saying, I'm a victim and a survivor. I'm not a victim, I'm a survivor of sexual abuse, or I'm, of incest, of racism, of any number of things, sexism, et cetera, and everybody seems to cling to that victimhood. And
it becomes a part of their identity. And that's
exactly
the thing.
And I'm guilty. Hey, look, I'm guilty of this. I've done this in the past.
So have I.
I've done it. Sorry?
I said, so have I.
Not saying that it's, that I've never done it before, because that's a complete bold-faced lie. However, I discovered that in clinging on to my victimhood or my survivorhood, I was actually demeaning myself, and depleting myself, because, basically living on a diet of victimhood is like trying to survive on donuts every day. You know what I mean? It's sweet, it's syrupy, and it's so delicious, but ultimately it does not sustain you.
And you ultimately feel like shit from it.
Right. Then
Well,
then you're laying on the floor holding your tummy going, and then you wonder why you have diarrhea for a week.
well,
It,
let me interject something here, and this is what people fail to understand. You are not your experience. Your experience does not define you. It does not make you who you are. It does not break who you are unless you allow it. But it is
right.
never, ever, ever a label. And that's the problem I have with this Me Too movement. And let me get this out while it's in my head so I don't lose it. The problem I have with this Me Too movement is you have women who were sexually abused as a child or molested or raped, whether it be violent rape or soft rape or sketchy rape or whatever you want to call it, who have long since passed, moved beyond it. And this Me Too movement has recreated or resurfaced any work that they have done to get past it. Okay, and now there's a term that I coined, and I'm going to be talking about this in the book that we're writing, Psychology, is drama trauma. And in my opinion, and once again, as you said, as I said, I have considered myself a survivor of abuse, sexual abuse. I have considered myself a survivor of all of these other things. But whether what happened was just an experience, I did not hang on to it for what it was. And I'm not going to allow somebody else's opinion of what it was revive it in my life and alter my life to pull me down. And that's what people are doing. When you've been past something for 20 years and you allow a hashtag phrase to revive it, and it causes you to lose sleep or to lose confidence in yourself and to do everything else, you are not being in control of your own life, your own emotions, and everything else. You're allowing the media and people with their opinions to gain control over your life through an event or an experience that happened a long time ago.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of understood the Me Too movement because it basically it brought to light something that had been happening for a very long time that I have actually experienced, and has happened to me. Okay, now does this basically color every part of my life? No, it does not. It does, however, give me empathy for somebody who has gone through it or something like that. But unfortunately, again, in this climate, rather than saying, for me, if I see somebody, and by the way, every woman I know without exception can say, hashtag me too. I would never say to them anything other than, I'm sorry that happened to you.
Well, you know what?
But I would never sit there and go, oh my God, and, gnash my teeth and pull my hair and all that and, beat my breast. I mean, that's just, but unfortunately that's what happens. And people start getting a little bit, it turns, and I hate to use this term, but it kind of turns into this whole mob mentality.
Well, you know something? I could say that there's probably not a guy that I've ever met that can't say hashtag me too either.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, and that makes me angry. I'm
going to raise something right here that is probably going to piss people off, and I'm not saying this to be controversial. I am saying this because it's God's honest truth. I can't tell you how many men in my quest for finding love that I never raped anybody, but I have probably put them in a position of sexual uncomfortability because of my own wanting to win their affections using sex. And that is something that a lot of women do. Every time, women sit there and doll themselves up They put on their makeup, they look all pretty, they do their hair, and they do that but they don't even see themselves unless they look in the mirror. So who walks around with a mirror in front of their face 24/7? Who does
Right.
that? Some people do, and don't get me wrong, but for the most part, we don't do that. But the reason we do that, we have been conditioned that we have to look a certain way. And so we look a certain way because that is the basis of our confidence because of the way that things have gone on. But we sit there and get dolled up and we dress all hoochie coochie, or, we do something like that. And if the wrong person, and I'm using bunny ears when I say this, takes notice, then all of a sudden they're being sexually harassed. Well, let me ask you this. If Jack Black walked up to you and say, "Oh, you look nice," how many people would scream #MeToo? If Sam Elliott from circa 1970 walked up to you and said, "Oh, babe, I want to fuck you," who would scream #MeToo? I wouldn't. To be perfectly honest.
No,
but
you know what? I don't think that saying that a woman, I don't know, to me saying that a woman has to wear a certain thing or whatever, that's blaming her.
No, it's not blaming her. And I'll tell you why it's not blaming her. Well, I guess in fact that in a manner of speaking, it is blaming her. But you can't expect, and like I said, I know that this is not going to be popular, but you can't expect to dress and put on makeup with the sole purpose of gaining attention and then picking and choosing who is allowed to garner, to dole that attention on you.
Well, I mean, there's a big difference between attention and somebody who is putting their hands on you. That's,
yes, and there are perverted males out there, but I've literally seen good, honest men lose their jobs, be ostracized for telling a woman she looks pretty, when point in fact she does.
I think that's a whole different issue.
But it happens more often than people want to admit. But
well,
my point
now
is,
it does because of the sort of, now it's sort of like I hate to say it, but sort of like this mass hysteria. Look, I think if a woman wants to wear, booty shorts, whatever, more power to you. I frankly think it's a yeast infection in waiting, but whatever. But the fact is that unfortunately, because of the dynamics in the world today, there are men who seem to have the idea or the thought in their head that they could do whatever the hell they want to. I mean, you have this whole area of the internet, apparently, the dark web.
But there are women that do that. But there are women who also do the same damn thing.
In what way? I'm sorry. What do you mean?
There are women who use their sexual wiles to chase men, and they do the same things to men, maybe not in the exact measurement of percentages, but it still happens. But you don't see that often. There's only been, I could count on one hand the number of things that I've seen where women are being accused of male sexual harassment versus all of my fingers and toes and yours and 50 other people in the world who it's happening in the turn. I'm not saying that people who regularly do a habit, but they're making it to the point that women and men cannot actually communicate with each other anymore, much less show interest in somebody without being accused of sexual harassment.
But I mean, where does that come from, though? I mean, I know everybody wants to blame the patriarchy and everything, but I think that's bullshit. I think the fact is that whenever you have a power dynamic that is unequal, you're going to have somebody who is going to take advantage. I mean, the whole problem is people with power who don't know how to use it properly. Like I said before, with great power comes responsibility, and unfortunately, most people, there are comedians who thinks it's perfectly acceptable to pull your pud in front of, somebody who is not as famous or powerful as you are. And that's just one of many. I've personally been, in a situation where I was deeply uncomfortable and felt very ashamed after the whole thing had happened. And it was somebody who was, a boss, and it was pretty horrible. Um, and I just wonder, at what point where do we get to the time where anyone in power, whether it be a man or a woman, learns that no means no and just respect each other? I think that's the one thing that is sorely lacking in our world right now, is that people don't, they have no interest. It's kind of like that slave mentality. It's like we were talking about being bred as slaves, eons ago. And so I think it just persists now, and it's not just women that have to put up with this nonsense, but men as well. I
Well,
mean, there's,
go ahead.
no, I'm just saying, I think once that people start to realize, and, and if they have some understanding of who they are, and learn to have empathy, and learn to understand that just because you're given a certain position or make so much money or whatever, that doesn't mean you can do whatever the fuck you want.
No, that notwithstanding, that's not really the point I was trying to make here. And so I'm gonna digress back a little bit into
Mm-hmm.
my point. Like I said, what is being done here, the population as a whole is being manipulated with these certain ideas into conflict. Okay? And
Mm-hmm.
they're
Yeah.
taking something. Yes, we know that people in power have a tendency to have done this stuff, whether it be male or female. It comes from both
Mm-hmm.
sides. It's not one or the other, it's both. And they're taking this and they're molding people's perceptions that certain behaviors are unacceptable. And in a certain extent, I agree. But they're taking these things to the extreme. Is the example, like I said, I've seen good, hardworking men lose their jobs and have their families and careers put on the line for giving a compliment when, because,
Oh,
now listen to
yeah.
me,
Yeah.
because
No.
this
I agree.
mindset,
I agree. And I'm going to have an example in a moment.
this mindset that somebody is sexually harassing them because they give them a compliment. I mean, like I said, the whole reason that women get dolled up, hell, the whole reason that men get dolled up is to project a certain image for somebody else, whether it's a person of the same sex or a person of the other sex. If it's to just to make somebody think that they're more important or whatnot, we sit there and put on these airs that has been a tradition of humanity for eons. And then when we get the attention from the wrong person, whether it is innocent or non-innocent, it has the same damn reaction. And there's a big difference between, I had a situation when I was 17, and I'm gonna tell this story. I've always gotten complimented on my looks when I was younger, because I used to do my hair and do my makeup and look all cute and shit. And I would always get attention everywhere I went, whether I wanted it or not. And I had somebody, strangers on the street, they would stop me on the street and tell me how beautiful I was, or stuff like that. And then I had somebody pull me inside and tell me he's going to find out if my pussy tasted the way it did in his dreams. That
Ugh.
is sexual harassment. Telling me I look pretty when I'm all dolled up, I don't care if it's an ugly stranger or a good looking stranger, is not sexual harassment. But that's what it has all been pulled down to. That
Right.
acknowledging someone's physical attributes in the positive by somebody of a different gender is now considered sexual harassment. Now,
Yeah.
if
No.
the same person of a different gender is attractive, and there's been psychological studies done on this, by the way, you have somebody who is good looking compliment somebody else, and it's not considered sexual harassment. You have somebody who is not considered good looking compliment somebody of the opposite sex, it can be considered sexual harassment. Sexual harassment is designed as anything that makes you feel uncomfortable. It doesn't even have to be sexual in nature. That's why under sexual harassment laws, And you learn this stuff doing in business. You know, when you're doing HR, you learn this stuff. They have laws and rules that pass down that can get somebody fired for even telling a semi-dirty joke if a person gets uncomfortable. And it doesn't even have to be a sexual joke. And that's what this is what I'm talking about. These mentalities, especially, you know, it goes with the mentality of being a survivor of sexual harassment. How many people who were actually sexual harassed experienced what I did with the guy telling me he's going to find out if my pussy tasted like it did in his dreams? How many people have been persecuted for it, for telling somebody they look pretty in that dress or their hair looks nice, without any sexual connotation or sexual overtone or undertones involved?
You know, you bring up a really interesting point, because there was another comedian. Boy, the comedy's taken a hit. But there was a comedian who has basically been vilified and lumped in with others who are actual rapists, and basically what happened, he went out on a date with this girl. She decided after everything was said and done, she wasn't comfortable. You know, he was basically saying, no, come on. And she gave in. And she could have left. She didn't. And now he's considered like a sexual predator. I think that's kind of stupid. The guy was an asshole, but he wasn't a rapist.
Yeah.
And the bottom line is that she was a grown woman. And I get it, you know, oh, girls are taught this and that. Yeah, well, you know what? I was taught that way too. I grew up in a, super hyper masculine Latino household. And trust me, if I didn't want to fuck somebody, I did not fuck them. Okay? I would leave. This woman chose to stay, and then wrote a newspaper article about it. And, so now this guy is being, again, cast into the lot with other famous people who have actually raped people. And he's being called a rapist, and I don't think that's fair. I think, he's a douche, but, he's a jerk. He's a lot of things, but he's not a rapist, and I don't think that's fair. And the problem with this sort of movement is we're getting, we're getting distracted. And frankly, as far as I'm concerned, the whole thing has become a distraction when you have people who were violated, legitimately violated, and saying, oh, somebody told me a dirty joke, and I got butt hurt about it. I mean, that's stupid. Again, there are things that I've experienced that were far worse than, somebody just told a dirty joke. And I'm saying this as a woman who was the only female on a crew of about 50 men at one point in the construction industry. So, trust me, I heard a lot of stuff. I would never in a million years say that any of those men sexually harassed me. They were just, they would talk their shit, whatever, and I just, whatever, besides which, it didn't have anything to do with me. So, I mean, I don't know. I think that, I don't know. I sometimes wonder about these younger generations. They're kind of mollycoddled and stuff. They don't seem to have any kind of a thick skin. You know what I mean? They take everything to mean that it's about them, and it has nothing to do with them. Yeah. If some guy tells a dirty joke in the office, then he's just being a jerk, or he's just talking shit. He's just talking. And I will admit that 9.5 times out of 10, I will laugh, even if it's really gross, or if I don't, I just go, ew, and just leave it at that.
Yeah.
But that is not sexual harassment. That is not in any way any sort of sexual abuse or anything like that.
Yeah.
I think that people like that are basically like diluting people who have truly suffered, physically have been traumatized, physically, psychically, emotionally, every way you can think of, by true horrors. I mean, there are, young women in Africa that were kidnapped by some militant group that still haven't been found. They've been married off. They were 13. And God only knows, or excuse me, the universe, whatever, only knows what they've been forced to endure and what they've had to do. They are people who are deserving of help, and that something we need to do something about.
Yeah,
but
there's a lot of this stuff that's it's straight up first cog behavior that I think that needs to be eradicated. But until people pull their own mentality out of that first cog behavior and step into second cog awareness, that stuff is just not going to go away. And it should.
Yeah.
And that's why, we're a proponent of cognitively advancing yourself away from those first cog egotistical Hapim behaviors.
Yep.
And, for me personally, I stopped wearing makeup in my early 20s because I didn't want attention. When I wore it, when I got all dolled up, I would get attention, male attention, unwanted attention from females too, not just men. And so I would not, in my jobs and, just going out and about living my life, I wouldn't wear makeup, I wouldn't do my hair, I wouldn't get all dolled up unless I was going to go out hunting. I'll be perfectly honest, hunting. And
we've all been there, honey. We've all been there.
But, there are just so many mentalities, and it's not just from the perspective of somebody, that you're looking at. And I understand what it's like to not want that kind of attention, but when we change our mentalities of, having to look perfect or having to do this, that's when we start to change how that situation encounters us. And, when you're a victim or when you're a survivor, which is another form of that victimhood, you do attract that which you least want because you're clinging to that victimhood. And when you set your mind or set your intent, okay, I don't want this in my reality, I remove it, then that's when that changes. People pick up on that energy and they shift who they are subconsciously because you're not attracting that type of behavior, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and what's very interesting too, I've noticed about people who tend to cling to that victim mentality also, is that there are certain individuals in this world that are predators. They're just predators, not just sexual predators, but predators, period. They're like
they have no consciousness.
What's that?
I said they have no consciousness. Those are the
right. They're like, and I hate to, because this is basically a slap at, slapping a shark in the face, but they're like sharks. They're constantly on the move and looking for something to prey upon, in any way they can prey upon them. And what's interesting is those people who cling on to their victimhood tend to be the first that the predators glom onto,
because they could smell it. They can
smell the weakness, and in with, that's the thing, with victimhood comes that weakness, because you're saying, I'm a victim, oh poor me, please, feel sorry for me, please protect me, whatever. And so they go, oh look, a low-hanging fruit, and they go and they pluck it. And unfortunately that just tends to happen a lot. And I mean, I've seen it, with people that I've known and stuff, and I've seen it happen over and over and over again. So, look, I understand that, bad shit happens to people, but the fact is that you should never let a particular moment define who you are. You have millions of moments, hopefully, in your future and in your life. And the point is that is one tiny moment. Why is that any different than right now or right now or right now? You know what I mean? The point is that, you're allowing that person to control your life. Number one, you're allowing that situation, that experience to control your life. And the fact is that, it's not who you are. any more than my cancer is who I am. My tumors, I'm not those tumors. I'm not the cancer. I am me. I am Pandora. And I am a multitude of experiences and moments. And they don't define me. They do help shape who I am. And they've allowed me, for instance, my cancer has allowed me to be a lot more empathetic, in certain respects to certain things. It's actually taught me a great deal about pain, about limits, about all kinds of things, about different energies, in fact. But, it's not going to define my whole life. And I would never go up to somebody and say, oh, hi, I'm a cancer survivor. That's just kind of insane. Oh, I'm an incest survivor. I'm a this survivor. I'm a that survivor. I survived yesterday. I survived walking across the street and not getting mowed down by some idiot. You know what I mean? It's like, when does it end?
Exactly. And that's kind of my point. When does it end? What's that expiration date on survivorhood?
Right. And why would, I don't go up to somebody and say, hi, I'm a survivor of sexual abuse. How are you? Why would I say that? You're just throwing shit on the person. The poor guy or woman is sitting there just living their life, and all of a sudden you come and you just lay this shit on them? It's like, good God, what is wrong with you? It's like, stop and think. It's kind of a stupid thing to do. You're like throwing all your energy. It's like you vomited all over
Well,
them.
and it doesn't tell the person anything about who
About
you
you.
are. No, it tells them an experience that you had, good, better, and different.
In this guy's case, 20 years ago, by the way.
Yeah. And and this is the thing about the psyche. I'm going to kind of share this. I'm talking about this in some of the recent books. I've finally figured out how to put this into words. Now, in the field of psychology, they define the psyche as the human soul, which is bullshit. The psyche is not the human soul. I shit you not. That's the way it's defined. But the psyche, all the psyche is, and this is the only way I could put it into words to make sense. The psyche is a warehouse. It's where you take and you put your experiences, good, bad, or indifferent, you put them in this warehouse, and anytime you encounter a new situation, you go into the warehouse, you look around, and you pull it out. Okay? And this is a lot of things about survivorhood, especially traumatic events, that people do not understand. Now, from my estimation, and this is not scientific information, this is from years and years and years of me studying the field of psychology, studying my own damn psyche, studying other people's habits, behaviors, and talking to a lot of other people about how they catalog these experiences. And what happens when you experience any kind of experience, whether it's happy, whether it's mediocre, whether it's traumatic, is your physical form is a recorder, and it records in a 360-degree fashion every experience that you have in this form. It doesn't record the bird's eye view, meaning what you see through your eyes. It records everything. And every single one of your senses is in play during an experience. Not just your eyes, not just your ears, but your nose, your sense of touch, your sense of taste. All 5 senses are engaged in the process. And all 5 senses record that input when you have an experience. And that experience gets recorded into the body. Now, what happens from a psychological standpoint is you have a way of interpreting the experience through your perceptions, okay? And what you do from a psychological standpoint is you take that experience and you put it in your psyche warehouse for later use. That's why people can completely block out the memory of an experience from remembering, but later it can be triggered because it activates the recorded memory in the cells of the body, and then you go straight to the warehouse and pull up the conscious recall, and they play together like a tape. So what people have a tendency to do when they experience these experiences, the psychological aspect, they are using this experience to label themselves. Okay, I experienced this, this is who I am. When in fact, it's not who you are. It's a traumatic experience that you have filed away in your, your recorded memory of your body, and that you have filed the psychological aspect of it in your psyche. So when it gets triggered, you pull that forward and you become that identity. And this whole process that we're talking about here on a second cog is cleaning out your psyche warehouse. Removing a lot of these programmed triggers that get recorded in the cellular memory, so that way you can detach the mental recall as well as the, you're not necessarily going to be able to clear out the memory recall of the experience, but you are going to be able to clear out the psychological trauma out of the warehouse. So when you remember it, you're not going to have that emotional reaction to the traumatic event. Does that make sense?
Perfectly.
Okay, and that's what people do not understand about this victimhood. So every time you have something like the hashtag #MeToo movement, they go run into their warehouse and they start cataloging and pulling out all of these traumatic experiences to identify themselves with. Well, you know what? That's baggage. In first cog, you hear the term, oh, I'm carrying a lot of baggage. But the thing is, you're carrying it by choice. They talk about, oh, I've got skeletons in my closet, or, oh, my suitcase has got baggage hanging out of it. The thing is, you don't have to carry that stuff around, but every time you go to that psychological, that psyche warehouse and pull it out, that shows you that you're the one responsible for continuing to hang on to that shit. You're not going to get rid of the memory, but you don't have to allow it to engage the psychological aspect of your being in order to move past it.
It's like that that Eagles song, that Glenn Frey, and I've told you this so many times, and I stand by it to this day. It's a great line from a song that says, so oftentimes it happens that we live our lives in chains and we never even know we have the key.
Yep. And the key
and,
is...
And you know what? And to be fair, and I'm going to say something that's really kind of dumb, but I think in a way it's kind of interesting. It's like, why can't you ever... I think the next time I walk up to a total stranger, I'm going to say... rather than saying something negative like, hi, I'm a cancer survivor, I'm going to say something like, I'm sorry to keep picking on that poor guy, but anyway, he kind of brought it on himself. I'm going to just say, hi, I am a survivor of a really good orgasm.
Yeah, because some of those have been very difficult to survive, to be quite honest.
Hey, they've given me headaches before.
Join the club.
I mean, you know what I mean? Just, God, I'm sorry. I don't mean to, I'm not trying to belittle it, but at the same time, it's like you're just basically hanging on to, and I know I don't mean to sound like some kind of self-help bullshit, but it's true. You're by hanging on to that stuff and you keep sort of feeding into that victimhood. All you're doing is you're putting yourself in that same position again. It's one shitty moment in your life, and your life is so many more moments than that. And the sooner you overcome that, the sooner you can get to a better place.
And that's what I mean by drama trauma. We do more trauma to ourselves by hanging on to that drama and reliving it and bringing it forth and re-engaging experience. And what people don't understand, you can layer on a negative experience by continuing to relive it and call that program forth and reinforcing it with the psychological aspect in the psyche warehouse.
Yep. I know people who, look, and if you don't think that's the case, look at somebody with PTSD. They hear a loud bang, and what happens to them?
Well, their physical body reacts because it's triggered in the form. And that's what people don't understand about anxiety. Anxiety is not necessarily psychological. It is mostly a recorded program in the physical form that triggers the physiology into action. And that is very difficult to control. And that's where our cell talk comes into place, because it can remove those physiological programming of anxiety. You know, whether it's PTSD, whether it's a phobia, or any type of just regular anxiety, you know, that does not necessarily spawn from the psyche. It does not have a psychological basis, although it can have a psychological association. But most times it is a physiological trigger from a program that has been recorded in the form. And once you disengage the triggers, you could then recall without having the physiological aspect. And you have seen one of my phobic reactions. And you knew how long, and that was not normal anxiety. That when it makes your heart race, when it makes your skin turn whiter than normal, when it makes you so shaky that your nervous system is on fire and there's nothing you can do to control it, that is a tripping point of a triggered cellular program. In most cases of anxiety, that's exactly what it is, and that stuff can be fixed without drugs, without medication. Well, drugs and medication, same thing, duh. But it can be fixed by doing this cell talk. But any kind of programs, and you're probably wondering how that ties into this survivor thing. When you look inside your own mind, if you claim survivorhood over anything, and you look inside your own mind, don't do it right now because I don't want you to trigger something. But you can look at that and you can see how the physiology reacts, and that physiological reaction can either be enforced by the psychological, or it acts on its own with no psychological tie-in. It's like with my phobia that you experienced, there was no psychological basis to it, but that didn't prevent the anxiety from it and how long it took to quell it. I think we've gone way off topic here, but...
No, I don't think so. I think in a way, I think this is actually going to be like a multi... this could actually turn out to be more than one or two podcasts. I mean, because honestly...
I think it's going to have to, because the first one was 40 some odd minutes, and this one we're fixing to cross over 50 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, these are all things that I think that need to be discussed. I mean, as somebody who's right now also in the, I knew a woman one time. Sorry, I'm going to go back to the subject. I knew a woman one time who was always fond of talking about her PTSD. She had PTSD. Because of something that happened to her, and it was always PTSD this and PTSD that, PTSD this, and one day I finally had enough of it, and I kind of go, I mean, I tried to be understanding, not sympathetic, but I tried to be understanding, and I finally said to her, and I said, you know what, I got PTSD from life. And she didn't find that very funny. But, the fact is that I just find it interesting that people seem to glom onto only the negative things that have happened to them.
Yeah.
It's very, I mean, I think that's part of the virus. I think that's part of the Hapim virus, that we glom onto the bad things that happen to us, and that's what we tend to focus on, and that's what we cling to, rather than all the beautiful, amazing experiences that many of us have had. I mean, even in our darkest moments, we can have a beautiful experience.
Yeah, because, I mean, you never hear anybody say, I'm a survivor of happiness.
Well, that's what I mean. I'm going to start telling people I survived an incredibly wonderful orgasm.
Hashtag
just to
me
change
too.
things up a little bit.
You're making me uncomfortable. Hashtag me too. Sorry.
Hashtag me too much.
Hashtag TMFI.
Yeah, too much.
Fucking information.
No, I mean, it's No, but again, it's and the thing is that the Me Too movement also, the one thing that we haven't really touched on is that it really does sort of cling into that hive mentality.
Oh, absolutely.
And the one thing that we're working so hard to break out of is the hive mentality. And it just kind of gloms right in there, boy. And it's like all the little worker bees, you know. Um, and so everybody jumps on the bandwagon, and so it's an all or nothing kind of proposition, and that's simply unfair and unjust. And in point of fact, as much as they're saying that these people who have taken advantage of them are tyrannical, they are in turn becoming tyrannical. They're becoming the very thing they're fighting against, by running around and saying that, oh, so and so did this, so and so did that. And the thing is that in a way, by all of everybody jumping on this bandwagon, it basically, again, takes away from the reality of the situation and allows these predators to hide in plain sight, because oh yeah, they can just, they can just turn it, everybody says it so much that it basically becomes meaningless.
It's like the boy who cried wolf.
It becomes meaningless, and it's like, so, oh yeah, okay, whatever. And that's what happens, exactly like the boy who cried wolf. So I feel like we have to address problems when they arise, take the people who have had to endure these things seriously, and investigate it, make sure that it's valid, and give people not so much the benefit of the doubt, but I thought in this country we're supposed to be innocent until proven guilty, but now it's
not
just
in
like,
the court of public opinion.
No,
and that's
no,
the thing.
it's
They're
like,
turning,
oh, you're that or whatever.
They're turning public opinion into a firing squad.
Right, and now, I mean, there's a situation here recently. Again, I'm sorry, I watched a lot of TV because, well, I have cancer, and no, I don't have cancer. I'm going through chemotherapy, but anyway, no, there's a woman who was one of the proponents of this Me Too movement, and as it turns out, she was diddling a 17-year-old boy in the state of California.
Yeah, I saw that.
And guess what? Age of consent is 18. So it's like, oh, how the tables have turned. You know what I mean? And people now are just like, ugh. And it's like, now she understands the venom,
Well,
And unfortunately, what's happening now is that people are saying, oh, well, look, if she said it, then it's all bullshit. You know what I mean? And that's simply not true.
It devalues an actual event. Well, and another ill side effect of this is, I have met men, and I have a lot of male coworkers, and we made this discussion, and yes, it's been jokes, but they're terrified to even ask a woman out on a date.
Nah.
Because what they've experienced with this is showing any interest in women are going to find themselves. You think it's hard enough to find a decent guy nowadays? I mean, they're going to find themselves unable to find any guy whatsoever because the guy is going to be too afraid to approach them. How are people of the opposite sex or the same sex, when they have a genuine interest in somebody, how are they supposed to approach? With a bomb squad shield? I mean, seriously,
Well,
and I'm not being funny when I say that, but that's almost what it's going to come down to.
I'm sorry, but that's funny because it's like, everything, a whole date will be a series of consent forms.
Exactly.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that this, like everything else, will, people will figure it out. But the fact is that, again, this is, unfortunately, these things happen when people have gone unheard. But as usual, mob mentality takes over and people get stupid about it, which is unfortunate and which is sad, again, for people who are truly suffering and have suffered. Basically, they're sort of drowned out in all of this. I mean, when you talk about this stuff, I also think about the people who haven't even spoken up, or who don't have a hashtag, or don't have Twitter, don't have a freaking cell phone. And those are the people that I'm sad for. You know what I mean? Those are the people that I'm concerned about, because they're the ones who suffer in silence. And, everybody's so busy, rah, 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 oh, look at me, aren't I amazing, and bringing this horror to light. It's like, let's get real, cut the bullshit, and let's start doing something. Let's start acting. Let's start changing, trying to change the way that people perceive women, how they perceive themselves, how men are perceived. And I mean, I know it's a long road to hoe, and it's going to be difficult. But the only way to do this is really start to get people to understand that the first cognition doesn't work. It doesn't work. It's not fruitful. It doesn't help you in any way, shape, or form. And in fact, it allows tyranny to continue, and you're just a party to it. You're fighting. You become the very thing you fight against.
The victim becomes the tyrant.
Exactly, and that's what's happened in the Me Too movement, and that's just one example. But the fact is that until humanity starts to see the benefit and the reality of working towards the second cognition, even taking a minor interest, I think would make a major shift in the energetic field of this world.
And taking responsibility for your own freaking emotions.
Take responsibility for your own shit and quit blaming everybody. I mean, look, if this is the case, I'm going to use myself as an example. I should be a drug addict. I should be, a prostitute. I should have 10 children by different fathers. But no, I mean, there are all these things that I should be. But you know what? I chose, and my siblings chose, a different way. And, you can't keep blaming your parents. You can't keep blaming, the guy who, fucked you over in 12th grade or anything like that. At some point, you have to take responsibility for yourself and decide that you're going to have a different life, that you're going to live a better life. And don't become the asshole that you're saying victimized you. And that's all that ends up happening, unfortunately, in this world, and it's wrong. It's just wrong.
Alter your perspectives of your experiences, and you change your experiences.
Right, and the thing is,
people may say that sounds glib, and and will sit there and roll their eyes at that, but to be brutally honest, I can tell you from someone who was a certain way, that had all of these dramas plaguing my life, that I was 100% responsible for dragging those dramas into my life. And when I owned that responsibility and said, enough, I'm not going to do this to myself anymore, I don't have those type of experiences. Not to even perceive differently. They don't exist.
Right. And don't blame God. Don't blame the devil.
And don't sit there and weigh yourself down with jumping to conclusions over minor shit. Yeah, it may be annoying to have some dumb fuck give you a cat call, but just ignore it. And eventually, the reason that they do it, because they get a reaction. That's why they do it. Yes, it's stupid. Yes, it's immature. Yes, it's straight up first cog. But you know what? If people would ignore them, they would stop doing it as well. That is psychological. That has been psychologically studied to death.
And don't even get me started about the political stuff.
No, we're not going to go there. Anyway, we're coming up on an hour.
It's just a mess. It's a mess. The whole point is that until people start taking responsibility for themselves, taking responsibility for their own actions and their own lives, and that's not to say we don't need help, that we don't need to help one another, because obviously there are people who do need help. Help those that need help, because it's the right thing to do.
But don't enable them in the process.
Don't what?
Don't enable them in the process.
No. I mean, I'm talking more along the lines of people who
No,
were.
I'm talking about people with these mentalities. When you sit there and
Oh, no. I'm talking about
poo-poo the
physical
poor,
stuff.
when you poo-poo the poor victim over and over again, and allow them to wallow in that victimhood without saying, "Hey, you know what? Have you analyzed your responsibility in this?" And I'm not saying that that means that a person who is raped is responsible for the rape, but they are responsible for how they respond and how they carry forward. And to sit there and allow them to wallow in that shit and give them the poor victim speech over and over again is not allowing, them to move forward. And I'm going to use an example here. Okay, I know somebody who was married 20 some odd years, and their spouse left them, and they spent a year and a half shit talking, talking about their poor life and how they were left and how they did this and how they did that and how their life was all this, and how could it be much worse? And I said to them, I said it could have been worse because they could have waited 30 years.
Yep.
And they got very mad about that, but you know what, as time went on and they started talking to other people, they realized that how many other people got left after 30 years and realized that only losing 21 years was not that bad, because it doesn't negate the life. It doesn't negate the life lived. It doesn't negate the experiences. All the experiences were not bad. This is a moment, something happened, people change their minds. It happens all the time. Don't sit there and dwell on it. Move forward and create your own life, because if you're sitting there dwelling on what was or what they're doing, you're not moving forward and creating your own life. You're not the victim unless you lay down and wallow in the shit.
Right. And like I said, even if you're crawling, at least you're moving.
Right.
And I'm going to bring up something else that
is not moving.
What's that?
Laying there flopping back and forth like a fish in mud is not moving.
Exactly. And I'm going to bring up something else that talk about this victimhood and everything. I was watching a very interesting documentary the other day on how charity is actually destroying the so-called third world countries that it purports to help.
Yeah, because it's enabling.
Right. And basically right now, they had many examples, but the one that stuck out to me was Haiti. Haiti is a country that has been brutalized. It's been robbed. It's been destroyed by the Europeans that went there. And it's endured some pretty horrible things. Okay, there was an earthquake. It destroyed most of the country. And what's so interesting is right now, if you talk to Haitians, they will say, what's the worst thing that's happening to you right now? It's like the fact that these charities won't leave us alone. It's so bad that these charities keep giving the Haitians shoes, clothes, all these things. So therefore, the people who are cobblers, who are clothes makers, who do all these other things, are not able to get their businesses going because there's too much free shit around.
People don't need it.
And so they're saying, quit sending us the frickin' shoes. You know what I mean? People, and so anyway, it turns into this really self-defeating thing. And I wish people would watch that documentary, and I can't remember the name of it. It was a PBS documentary, but it was talking about how, all of these, they always say the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And I understand these people may have good intentions, although I kind of wonder. But without getting too conspiracy theorist right now,
to make themselves feel better, but that's beside the point.
Right, but I mean, basically charity is destroying these countries because they're not being allowed to grow themselves. And I think that first cognition behavior is just like that charity. You have to at some point just stop and let them do for themselves, and they will figure it out. They're trying to figure it out, but right now they can't, because again, they keep getting undermined by all these charities who keep trying to help them and trying to give them stuff. And again, I'm not saying that people don't need help, because if somebody really needs help, by God, help them.
Well, you know what? You mentioned that undermining, and that I think is another aspect of those movements like the Me Too movement and everything else. They're undermining people's own psychological stability by creating this rehash of something that should have died long ago.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and again, it's not your whole life. It's a moment in your life. Your life is a series of moments, and that was one bad one.
And it's an experience.
And
It's not a label. It's not who you are. It's not who you were.
exactly.
It's not who you're ever going to be unless you create that for yourself.
And by the way, just, full disclosure, everything that I've said is something that has happened to me. So I'm not speaking just out of my ass and just saying, oh, get over it. It's not that. It's from having been through the victim survivorhood game, and it didn't work for me. In fact, it was killing me. And, now that I've started working towards a second cognition, suddenly things have opened up a lot for me and changed. And it doesn't mean that I'm not, I'm immoral or, whatever. It just means that my perspective on certain things has changed. And so I deal with things differently. And I try to be a little more circumspect about how I react to things. That's another thing.
React or respond.
And right, and not be so reactive again. And I'm going to bring up the C word again, because that has been an experience that has really brought home how much my perspective has really changed. And if you don't think that's a trauma, then you're out of your mind, because it is. But again, it's a moment. It's one moment out of many, and there will be more. There will be others. And it's just something that's happened at this point in my life, and I'm dealing with it.
Well, awesome. Well, I think that's about it. If you have nothing else to say, then we're going to wrap this down. You got anything else to say?
No, I mean, if I can be inspirational, fine. If they want to tell me to go fuck myself, that's okay too. Either way, I don't,
You might enjoy that, actually, but, who knows?
I'm sorry. It's such a serious subject. I'm sorry, I was getting way too serious there.
Well, at least we have injected a little bit of humor in there. And, Pandora, I want to thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity for you to share your story and share it with our subscribers. And if you all have questions, feel free to post them in the comments, in the comment section. And I want to thank everyone for listening, and for all of you doing the work. Stay the course and don't give up on yourself.